Hey there, today I'm going to be talking about 6 characters that I think deserve more credit than they get, and which affiliations can fully bring out that potential. My name is Nate, and welcome to the Gamers Guild. Now, I am admittedly going to cheat a little bit here and there with some honorable mentions and maybe some squeezing in an extra character here and there, but really this is a video that is going to hopefully convince you to knock some dust off of some models that haven't seen the table in a while. But before I get into that, I want to do my usual thanking of the guild sponsors, Tritex Games based in the UK and War Room Hobbies based here in Tennessee. Both are wonderful local gaming stores that have game nights, events, tournaments, and all that kind of stuff, and just supporting their local communities. And both also have codes that you can use on their website to save you even more off of their already discounted prices. If you use the code TritexGGCP5 at checkout, you'll save an extra 5% off of Tritex's MCP selection, and if you're using that on pre-orders, that'll knock you up to 25% off of whether that's like the Winter Guard wave that's coming out, maybe Heimdall and Scourge, and plenty more things that we know is on the way. And if you were checking out at War Room Hobbies, you can use the code MCP2022 for an extra 10% off of your order, whether that is for MCP, Legion, or whatever else you're into. So if you're shopping online anyways, please consider using them as an option to support an LGS that is hosting events and game nights instead of a big warehouse company. So if any of those upcoming releases I just mentioned, maybe even a Malekith on his giant tiger, lion, bat thing, well, those are going to be some great places to pick that up from. However, if you are already shopping from your local gaming store, that's awesome. Keep supporting them. We understand and appreciate it. But if you are still wanting a way to support the Guild's videos or podcast, check out our Patreon page. For as little as $1 a month or $12 over the course of a year, you help us continue to put out content for Marvel Crisis Protocol as a podcast and here on YouTube. And I do want to give a quick shout out to all the members of the Guild Hall who are supporting us through Patreon and what we do here. There is a new project that will be coming to fruition, hopefully come the 3rd anniversary of the channel in August. We do also have a monthly giveaway thanks to Tritex. All you need to do to enter is be subscribed to the channel and leave a comment on a video the same month that video was released. So let's kick it off, and I do want to go ahead and cheat a little bit up front and hand out a couple of honorable mentions to some wonderful characters that make great out-of-affiliation splashes, but they aren't really hidden gems because they aren't hidden. They're just kind of obvious in some ways. Like Juggernaut in Kingpin's Criminal Syndicate is a very popular splash, as is a character like Mystique for the Wakandans or Midnight Suns for her innate superpower interacting with their attack tactic cards. As well, there are characters who also really fun just didn't quite make this cut, like Ghost Rider with the Guardians of the Galaxy or the newly revealed Heimdall with Steam's Avengers, just because there are characters that I knocked up a little bit higher. And finally, the characters who got snubbed because even though there are certain affiliations that can make them shine, they still aren't what I would first run as an optimal choice, kind of like Elektra with Convocation. And with all that said, let's get into my list. And the first 2 hidden gem characters also happen to be characters that carry some gems with them. And the first one I want to talk about is Ebony Maw. This guy saw some pretty serious revisions during the 1.5 update, and all for the better. His energy defense was raised by 2, his stamina was increased by 2 on his injured side, bringing him from 4 to 6, and had one of his superpowers completely changed and a new superpower added. The changed power is Mind Over Matter. It used to cost 2 power so that when Maw was targeted for an attack, he could use his Mystic Defense pool instead. It now works like Enchantress's and Mysterio's ability, where the defender will have to pay power to reduce Maw's defense pool, which makes him significantly more durable in the early game. He added the power of telekinetic deflection, and it just lets him spend 2 power to ignore a collision, so his own personal brace for impact. So whether he is getting thrown or something thrown at him, as long as he has that 2 power, he's going to be just fine. So these changes helped him a decent bit, but he still has some issues. There isn't any consistency to his dice, and he likely won't be getting 2 attacks a turn without a little bit of help in the mobility department. So, if you slap the Space Gem on him, suddenly his mobility becomes a good bit more flexible, and he gets more power, which is actually something he should want, since Maw can only ever get 1 with his builder. The fix to the other half of his problem is making him an honorary member of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Getting to reroll 2 dice can either be a life-saving event for Maw, or a life-ending event for his enemies, even as early as turn 1. With the combined power of the Guardians and the Space Gem, Ebony Maw can use a move action and his Space Gem to make it to the middle line objective. Have a 6-die attack with 2 rerolls, and that nets you a 66% chance to get a wild and a pretty good chance of hitting 4 or 5 successes to push through some damage. And after all of that, Maw will still have 3 power left over to throw a size 3 or 4 object long at whoever was contesting that point before you. This has allowed my Maw to outright daze a Green Goblin and many other 3-threat characters right out of the gate on round 1. Sure, Maw is 6 threat and can get beat up on and once your enemies have some power, but the first couple of turns he is on the board, he should have some pretty devastating results. Now, unfortunately, as of last week, there was a pretty significant hit to Space Maw in the form of the Space Gem going to Restricted, and it probably wasn't really even aimed at Maw, this restriction, much more so to take Thanos down a peg. So the Maw splash is certainly a little bit harder to justify now, but thankfully for what it's worth, Maw does get to bring in his own personal tactic card, Shush, or Nope, that can be a very powerful effect that your opponent feels like they usually have to play around. And while they're trying to tiptoe around it, it only makes the card that much more impactful on the game state, not to mention when you finally do play it and just shut down whatever they're going for. Next up is a character that probably won't be considered a hidden gem much longer since his main affiliation is getting some more love, and that is Loki, specifically with the Mind Gem. Now, Loki on his own can get up to some pretty fantastic shenanigans with the Mind Gem, especially when your enemy is forced to stay inside of his God of Mischief bubble that will cause your opponent's superpowers to cost 1 more, and then on his injured side, additionally make it so they can't roll in extra dice from crits. But Loki will often still be pretty power hungry because he can almost always be using power during his turn or whenever he gets targeted for an attack. However, the one place his power never seems to run dry is with Steve's Avengers. Loki can either Mind Gem someone for 1 power, turn 1 to get them off of a point, and then double move to get onto that point himself, or just move up once, reel someone in, and then throw a 5-die strike counting blanks as successes. Which, by the way, hits 4 to 5 successes even more consistently than Maw's attacks with rerolls. And if you decide to just have him double move, he will have leftover power for a defensive I Am a God, or he can just Trickster out of the way. And since Trickster is an ability that can allow Loki to move in any direction, he could even use it to stay in range of the attack, but then gain cover, or just to reposition after getting shoved off of an objective himself. Not to mention the super rude play of moving into range of Captain America, who can then bodyguard that incoming attack. One of the other things that the Avengers really helps Loki, and it helps keep his power supply up, is the easy access to counting blanks as successes on his attacks. Because with the Mind Gem, he should have enough power to Mind Gem a target wherever he wants them, and then have enough power for a super strike every single turn. And then, assuming at least 2 damage gets through, which against a basic 3 physical defense, it will, Loki can have the power for Trickster or another I Am a God strike. Really, Loki just becomes a really hard-hitting piece with some control and fantastic damage output when he gets paired with Steve. Next up, I have a character that I have only taken for a spin a couple of times in this affiliation, but each time she has impressed. Miss Marvel makes for one heck of a web warrior, and not just because of her cute tactic card with Miles, granted it doesn't hurt either. First of all, since she is an Inhuman with plenty of rerolls on her card, there's a natural synergy with Miles' leadership letting her reroll her failed dice results. Her Morpho Punch in tangent with Gwen's Webline can really help you disrupt your opponent's secure game early, as long as you manage a wild on 4 dice with a reroll. And like any other web warrior sans Venom, she is quite mobile. Her Embiggen that lets her put out some Baron Zemo level of attacks also equates to a free medium move after all of the transforming is done. So that in tangent with her reroll synergy and some control elements can really help fill out a web warrior's team. I will say A Better Tomorrow is a cool option to have, but in the 2 games I brought the card with her, I didn't have the power to play it when Miles and Marvel were next to each other, unfortunately. For my 4th spot, I have an affiliation and a character that I have been seeing a lot of play for myself personally, and that's Medusa with Shadowlands Daredevil. Medusa has a significant downtick in play after her nerf because, well, she is no longer just straight up busted. And outside of Inhumans and A-Force, she isn't affiliated anywhere else, and those 2 affiliations haven't really been popular, whether that's because they haven't seen a lot of new releases, or they just aren't seen as competitive, who knows. But Shadowlands Daredevil gives her the chance to be the terror she once was by getting an extra reroll on her attacks. She still won't be hitting her flurry as often as she used to, but it does increase the odds by about 10%, and she still offers up extra mobility, control, and a throw to a team that doesn't really have much of the above in any of that. So her Royal Decree helping getting a character into the right position can be great, and really just the size 3 pushes and throws that she has access to for the team is great because otherwise they are traditionally a control through killing kind of team. Granted, it is usually just best to spam as many 3-threat characters as you can, like Hood, Winter Soldier, Domino, and so on, but if you end up at a point total that welcomes her, or a scenario that is clumped up like Gamma, or one where having Bullseye on a back point would be beneficial to the team, Medusa is always the first 4-threat I look at. Next up is one of the earliest characters who unfortunately hardly ever sees play outside of his home affiliation. In one of the earliest affiliations, as a matter of fact. Vision is a monster of a character who I think is certainly on the rise as a splashable character with the downfall of Medusa and Enchantress. But I think the one place he works even better than his home affiliation of Avengers is with the Wakandans. And it's basically because Vision is a character who can generate power super easily, but doesn't really have too many ways to spend it all unless you want to do his spender, which isn't going to be the best option most of the time. So 2 power for his throw, or 2 power to swap to his defense mode if an unexpected attack comes his way, but considering his beam allows him to gain at least 1 power per target hit, if not more because of the sap power, Vision usually has a pretty good excess of it. Enter the Wakandan leadership that lets you spend a power to reroll a die for an attack, defense, or dodge roll. Suddenly Vision has a very powerful outlet to spend that extra power he will be getting. And in addition to some now pretty consistent attacks and defense rolls, Vision should still have enough power to toss out a throw, leaning into Wakandan's controlling nature. Now, my final hidden gem is where I'm going to cheat again, just by a little bit, by mentioning 2 characters, and they are Kraven and Ghost Spider, working alongside Blade and the Midnight Suns. So the synergy with these 2 characters and Blade's leadership works the same way because they both have an attack that if they have advanced or been placed earlier in the turn, they get to make an advance again. For Kraven, it's a medium advance, and for Gwen, it's a long one, and she also has Wall Crawler, which makes it especially nice. So they don't get the huge initial bump of movement you would off of something like Hulk, Ghost Rider, or even Hela from Bump in the Night, but the additional movement you can get from their attacks afterwards more than makes up for it. Not to mention for Kraven, if that initial bump gets him within range 2 of an enemy, he can pull off his bigger combo of Kukuri Strike followed by the Spear Thrust to throw a whole lot of dice. I will say that both of these characters are pretty vulnerable also, with only 5 stamina and 3s across the board on defense, so this extra burst of mobility can also keep them alive longer and give them access to some easy hit and run tactics. The Midnight Sun also appreciate either of these additions as well, I think. Gwen offers up a lot of board control, which the affiliation has very little of in-house, especially at the lower threat values. As for Kraven, he brings a nice mix of mobility and damage output that the Midnight Suns seem to like, not to mention his ability to mark targets for death. And on a mission like Gamma Shelters, having Kraven go and mark someone with Expert Tracker and then immediately following up with Siege of Darkness before your opponent can react could be very helpful for taking down a target like Hulk or Magneto. But these are my 6 hidden gems that I don't think get enough love. If you have another thought or suggestion, feel free to leave a comment down below as to who, and as long as you're subscribed, it will also enter you in the chance to win the monthly giveaway. I will say I do know that today is the beginning of a new month, so there should be a giveaway here, but by the time this video goes live, I will be out of town where there is actually no internet, so the drawing for June will happen next week. As always, if you've enjoyed my thoughts and are new to the channel, hit the subscribe button for a weekly dose of MCP content in the form of reviews, battle reports, and just other topics like this one, I guess. As well, you can find the Gamer Guild podcast on several different podcast apps and platforms. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, keep on gaming.